Everybody listen to We're Not Wizards, because we are the best, and we're not wizards, no matter what anybody says. Goodbye.
Hello and welcome to another episode of We're Not Wizards. My name's Richard. I'll be your host for whenever. Because let's just kick back. Let's face it. Things could potentially be said to be a little bit grim. Things could be said to be a little bit tidal. Things could be said to be... You want some kind of protective canopy over yourself. You know, you don't want to stop and the march of time or even the march of the ants. You know, it's whether or not you want to be the big boss in town or just settle down and be the little pig. And there's only one person who sums up all of these various different things. I'm not going to hide who he is. There's not going to be any type of grim masquerade here. Joining me, I've got Tim Eisner. Hi, Tim.
Thank you for that wonderful intro. That was, the hype. It was just building up that I got a little bit panicked and, had to take a quick break, check my sanity and see if I could deliver on all those things. But
how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I took some deep breaths and I'm ready to go.
It's been, I think you should not only take some deep breaths, you should potentially take yourself a little bit of a rest, because it's like one of the things I'll tell you what it is, Tim, is that on occasion I do some research. And I'll do a search on Board Game Geek, and I'll check kind of like an artist, like somebody's discography, and you have been very, very prolific. I know I try to fit in quite a few kind of different things into the intros, but if I'm looking at this, this year alone, we've talked about kind of like the March of the Ants, you had Wonderland's War. Going back into last year, you had the huge success with like kind of like Tidal Blades. You've had the Grim Masquerade. You've had the... are you actually going to sit down and take 5 minutes to yourself and, enjoy, smell the coffee, as you would actually say?
Oh, man. That's actually one of the things on my to-do list, which is quite long and extensive, but it keeps getting pushed down. So, but in all seriousness, it is something I sort of struggle with and have been trying to like take a little bit of a break, take a breather. Mm-hmm. But I just get really excited about games, and I keep telling like my brother or my partner, I'm like, I'm going to start doing less, I'm going to take a little break, not take on as many projects. And then like, I'll be trying to sleep one night and I'll think up a new game idea and I'll be like, oh, cool. Look, I got this new game idea. I'm going to work on this and I'm going to get this going. So it's, I think I'm getting better, but it's really hard to say because I kind of am addicted to like creative projects and like making things, and board games have been really fun to work on. So I'm trying to take a break. I keep trying, but then fun opportunities keep coming along with cool games and good people to collaborate with. So
is this what you're doing on like a full-time basis? There's not like, you don't have like a part-time job in like a sandwich shop or something like this. Is making games, is this what you kind of do all the time?
It is actually, yeah. I am lucky enough to be making games full time. I was working in a sandwich shop in college. It was a bagel shop, but that was, it was good, but, didn't really pan out in the long run. So, but
See, I do my research. I knew there was some kind of snack
you knew there
system
was
involved.
something in there, definitely. I mean, I do really enjoy snacks too, so that's the other sort of main
But
thing that occupies
I
my
didn't
time.
want to say it. There is such a thing as quarantine belly, and being a man in my middle age, I've certainly kind of looked down and went, I didn't realize that was there. It's like I didn't realize I was carrying like a tire now. I mean, for goodness sake,
You're like, oh, just keeps growing. So yeah, since Grimm Forrest was super successful. Since that time, I've been able to dedicate to working on board games full time. Before then, it was sort of I'd work on it full time for a couple months and then go work another job and then come back. And so, but it's been really nice to have it be my full focus.
So, what's your current kind of employment situation? Are you kind of working mostly with are you employed by Skybound particularly, or are you kind of like their head guy that they go to in terms of the game design side of things?
That's a good question that a lot of people have asked me. Like, I've gone to a couple conventions and publishers are like, do you just work with Skybound, or do you have other games? And so I'm self-employed. I work for myself. I have Weird City Games, which I do, some of my own titles, March of the Ants, and then Canopy, which is upcoming. And then mainly I've been doing design work with Skybound. So, and I've sort of been their main designer, although they're branching out and they've been working with other designers, which is great. But I did the March of the Ants campaign, the first one, which was a while back, about 5 or 6 years. And that's how I got into board game design, and did another one. And then I wanted to sort of experiment with the publisher side of things, because a lot of people are like, oh, should I Kickstart or should I try and pitch to a publisher? And so I was curious to see what would be, more interesting or more fulfilling. And, there's good things on both sides. And so now I'm just I went heavy into working with publishers for a while, and now I'm sort of back onto doing some of my independent stuff.
Where's the creative stuff come from? I mean, if we set the way back clock, I mean, where did that kind of start off? I mean, had you always been quite creative as a child? Was it something that you found yourself kind of becoming more interested as it growing up? I mean, how did you kind of start off, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it was pretty early on, and I think one of the main influences was my dad, Keith Eisner. He used to tell us these fantastic stories. So he would just make up stories about characters and sort of create these worlds out of nothing. And so I think that really sparked a lot of interest there. And then I also I was lucky enough to go to a Waldorf school, which is a sort of alternative private schooling method that is very focused on creativity and very focused on, personal expression. And so we didn't learn to like read or write in Waldorf until 4th grade, which is a little abnormal. But we did lots of watercolor and sort of plays and drama and sewing and all sorts of stuff like that. And so,
wow.
So that took, I didn't really realize until I was in college, and then I was looking back and like some of the like little doodles I draw or some of the drawings, I would be like, oh, this is some patterns I learned back in Waldorf. And I think just that sort of early focus on creativity in that schooling method really pushed me to like accept and pursue that a more creative path.
Is that how you continued on your kind of like your career? I mean, what was it you mentioned? What was it you did in college?
So not entirely. In college, I ended up getting a major in Spanish language. Yeah, which I had started studying in high school and was interested in, and traveled abroad, lived in Spain for a year. And I was interested in language, and it was very, very fun, but it wasn't necessarily like my main passion. It was just like, oh, this is something I've done and spent enough time doing. I don't necessarily want to stay longer in college and pursue other things. So, And I've traveled a lot after that, so that's how I've used that degree, but I haven't really used it, in a sort of work business sense necessarily.
So where did you go after that? I mean, you traveled a bit. I mean, did you not think about kind of staying kind of within travel industry, going into international business, anything like that at all? I mean, I'm getting Spanish and languages, but I'm not getting, here's a game about gathering resources for pigs. So how did that kind of
Totally.
how did
Well,
that
it's
kind of
been
come
sort of
about?
a wandering path, to tell you the truth. So I graduated from college, and alongside the Spanish degree, I also got a teaching English as a second language, sort of like sub degree or little certificate. And so I taught English in South Korea for a year, which was interesting and fun, but felt a little bland. The students weren't necessarily super motivated to learn English. They just were learning sort of out of obligation.
Yeah.
But when I came back, one of my best friends, had just started doing improvisational comedy. And so he was really hyped on it, and he was like, "Hey, you got to do improv. You got to come up here and do this theater thing." And
Well, I guess your friend is like doing improv, and he's like, "Hey, Tim," and you're like, "Hey, would you like to do some improv?"
yeah, I was like, "Hey, I'm going to the store. Do you want me to buy you anything?" That's one of the best lines you can come up with in improv, because people are always shopping. So he was like, "Do you want to do some improv?" And I was like, "Yeah." Started doing improv, and I started working at the front office of the improv theater. And then within like a year, the creative director, got fired, and they were like, "Hey, Tim, you know how to run the front of the house. You should be the creative director." And I was like, "Well, I can't really do that, but sure, I'm confident and feel like I can take that on."
Hang on. I'm going from collecting tickets to deciding what the show's going to be about, kind of thing.
Yeah,
How does that?
exactly. So, well, it's improv.
It's just like, I suppose it's like, what did you do? Did you look at? I would have looked at them seriously in their eyes, and I would have went, "Are you just expecting me to make this up as I go along?" And they would have looked at you quite seriously and went, "Well, yes, Tim, that's exactly
That's
what we
exactly
expect."
exactly. And that's one of the tenets of improv. One of the central things is like, you are the expert. Whatever you're doing, just pretend like you're the expert, and you'll figure it out along the way. And so, being a young 24, 25-year-old, I was like, "Sure, I can do this. This doesn't seem that hard." And the person before me was just not doing a very good job. She was really controlling and sort of fearful, and I was like, "Well, I can at least do as well as she was doing. I don't really think I'm going to be like an all-star, awesome creative director, but I can, at least, keep some shows going and keep it moving for a bit." So I took that on, and that was pretty fun for 2 years. But then I was managing a group of like 20 volunteer actors. And so it's a pun and not a pun to say there was a lot of drama going on. And it was a lot of like managing other people's personalities and like helping them be creative, but not being that creative myself.
Did you get was it frustrating? Because you seem to me quite a creative person anyway. So there's a little bit of frustration that you kind of went, well, I probably would have rather been on the stage rather than try to manage it. It must have been like trying to herd cats.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very similar. And I did end up getting pretty frustrated by that, because I would still perform and still get on stage, but I always was kind of wearing two hats of like, "Oh, I'm also the director, so I've got to like lay down the law and make rules. And then I'm also trying to just be relaxed and play and be creative." And so it ended up being a little bit stressful in that way.
What kind of improv person are you? Are you like a singery type person? Are you, are you kind of like more into kind of the skits? Do you do voices?
No.
Does Tim Eisner do voice? I reckon you do voices.
Yeah, no, but don't do any voices. I sometimes make some funny faces. I'm more of a narrative. Like, I'm more of the story person, and like to create fun, weird stories or like
Mm.
do fun things with language. So I would do some voices, but I'm pretty bad. They would kind of just be funny because they weren't good. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then I was okay doing some physical comedy, but not really. I'm pretty tall and lanky and never really got like fully, into like the physical comedic form. But yeah, so I do a variety of it, but mostly I feel strongest about my narrative things. There's a couple like storytelling games and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that, and I would feel very confident just jumping off and like making up characters and running with that.
Did you ever do any kind of Dungeons and Dragons type stuff then?
I did.
Did you feed into that type of stuff?
I did, definitely. So that was another sort of mainstay growing up is my parents had an old box of the first edition D&D, and my brother
Wow.
is older than me, so he had got into that, and we started playing, pretty frequently growing up. Not necessarily by all the rules, but making up stories and characters and playing that. So that was a mainstay for my childhood, like growing up for quite a bit.
How long did you stay as a creative director in the improv side of things then?
I lasted for about 2 years, and then I was kind of, just done, like not being creative myself, and wanted to do some more personal creative projects, and and just the stress of it didn't seem necessarily worth it to me anymore. It was also really fun and enjoyable, but it was time to like change things up. So, so I went looking for something a little more like personal and like self-focused that I could do creative wise.
Were you continue to play games? Were you playing games in the background while you were kind of doing this? I mean, or were you just kind of like, well, no, I'm just chilling out. I'm sitting down because this thing's exhausting being around these people.
We were still playing games in the background. It was a little more low key at that time. I started playing Magic the Gathering when I was like 14 and played off and on, sort of stopped in college for a bit. But then afterwards, when I was doing improv, I was doing that occasionally, and then also playing, like Catan and Carcassonne and some of those games. And it was a feature, but wasn't necessarily like a centerpiece for me at that time.
Was there any time at that point, did you have like a little spiral bound kind of notepad and you were kind of flexing a little bit of the old creative muscles? Back then at all?
I wasn't with then, but it was funny because in, like a year or so before, my brother and I had made a drafting card game. We designed our first game. I don't even remember why we decided to design a game, but we were like, I think we'd been playing a lot of Magic cards and we've been doing Magic drafts. And we were like, drafting is really fun. This is the best part of Magic. And then we were like, you should make this into a game. And this was before Seven Wonders or Sushi Go or any of that, And so we made up a drafting game. I think it was called Merchant Princes, where you built up your cargo and then tried to sail across the sea, so there was like some movement and a board and stuff like that. But and we got like a prototype done and then played it and did maybe one revision, but this was back in like 2003. So there wasn't very many resources, or it was hard to figure out what to do after that point. And so we kind of just let it lie, after that. We were like, that's cool, but whatever. Okay, moving on to the next thing. So I kind of had just dipped our toes in a little bit way back then. But then it was kind of dormant for the next 8 or 9 years. I didn't really write down any game ideas or have any like strong inkling of like, I want to do this.
What were you doing on the day job at that point?
So I was managing the theater. I was getting paid to run the theater for a couple of years. And then after that, I left the theater and sort of went searching for myself. And I traveled in South America and learned this jewelry making technique called macrame, which is tiny little knots that you hand tie. And when I learned that, I've immediately fell in love because it was a very personal thing that I could do myself and have like full control over. So it was like kind of the direct opposite of the managing the theater. And I came back to the States and started living in Portland, Oregon. And there's a Saturday market here where there's a lot of artisan crafters. And so I got a booth there and started making and selling jewelry there for about 3 years.
Wow.
So that was pretty fun, but also, and at that point I started playing a lot more games. My friends down here, we would play Dominion like every day, and Magic, and a couple other games, Catan and stuff that were, mainstays. And so games became a little bit more present on my mind.
See, my mum got into macrame.
Oh yeah.
She was into macrame to the point that she made an owl out of macrame, and this owl thing was made up of brown string, and she must have spent literally weeks on this thing to the point that there was like some kind of like everything was string apart from these green eyes, these green beads.
Yep.
And they're wooden beads. They're wooden beads, and they were the middle eyes of this owl, but one of the eyes was slightly to the right, so it looked like an owl with a squint. And the claws on it, what she'd done is because I remember this, is that when you were making stuff like this, you had to use glue. Well, she was told she had to use glue to make the claws. So she got the string, and she kind of frayed it a bit to kind of strengthen out to kind of spread out the fibers, and then she basically kind of took the glue and she wet the end of these fibers, then she twisted it, and then she ended up touching stuff and kind of stuck whole piles of stuff to her fingers. But we had this out.
That sounds tragic.
We have this out. No, it was true. It was, she looked like a really badly decorated cake, like hundreds of thousands, and it was almost like one of those really bad kickboxing films where they stick the glue into their hands and then they get the hammers and they get the nails and the glass and everything. That's how her hands look, because they're just covered in stuff. And this owl must have sat in the living room for years. And you would stare up at it and there was something not wrong, and it was this squint this owl had, and it was continually, you were just wondering where it was, which mouse were you looking at, owl?
Right.
So I totally see, but I understood, and then you were like, oh my word, macrame looks rubbish, but then when you seen it done really, really well, it looked absolutely fantastic. So so you were doing that on the market, and you're saying you're playing kind of more games at the time.
Yeah. Yep. So, and actually, when I was working at the market, it's funny that you mentioned your mom, because I had, there were some young people who came up to me and were interested in my macrame, but there was a lot of women in their like 60s or 70s who were like, oh, I used to do this back in the 70s. This was great. That was like half my customer base was people who had done it in the 70s and were like excited to see it again and would tell me their stories about things they had made and stuff. So would have been perfect. So I was doing that, and then gradually I got a little bit burnt out of doing macrame. One, I think I just have a sort of restless, spirit that wants to try a bunch of different things. And two, it's a lot of work hand making every single thing that you're selling. Like, it was a lot of, I'd put a lot of creative energy into something and make a cool necklace or some bracelets, and then I'd sell them, over the next couple of weeks, and they'd be gone, and then I'd have to make another batch. And so that was really fun to make things by hand, but it also became a little bit draining. And so I started thinking about, some kind of new, by that point I was pretty hooked on like having my own business or doing something entrepreneurial. And I was like, oh, what's something new I could do that would be, exciting and interesting. And I was like, well, if I do board games, like I'll learn some stuff. I'm going to have fun. I might not make any money or very much money, but like, it'll at least be interesting and be something that I want to do, and I was lucky because at that time, that was like 2012, 2013, Kickstarter had just started taking off with board games. So it was like, oh, this is possible. There is, seeing viticulture, seeing some games where like, oh, wow, they did make, a decent amount of money and able to start a business. So, so that's sort of how it started. And the games, I mean, they've always been a part of my life. I grew up playing chess with my dad and my brother and playing a lot of trick-taking games with my whole family. And, we would sort of play Risk and make up different rules and and I always enjoyed games. So they were always big and enjoyable. I think sort of the main thread, because it's not totally connected, my stories kind of like weaves in and out, is just sort of a, playful, like I like things where you're playing or there's some room for, experimentation. And so the theater sort of led into that. There was a lot of play, and the macrame is I would do things that were just sort of free form. I didn't follow any patterns, and they would just go wherever I wanted to, lead them or found out where they were going. So, so that just sort of led me to board games, which has been the thing that caught my interest and has held my interest. And I've been doing it now for about 7 years. So it's been pretty cool.
What's your creative process that you follow? Because I know some people if I speak to say David Turcey,
mm-hmm.
he's got millions of ideas, but he seems to just say, right, I can nail something down very, very quickly. So are you a kind of a post-it note type guy? If I went into your office, would you just have ream after ream of post-it notes with 3 or 4 word kind of cryptic answers? Or are you kind of selective? Do you kind of hone it down into 2 or 3 projects that you just focus on and then get to completion kind of thing?
Well, I'm still, even after 7 years, I'm still kind of figuring it out. So it's kind of the thing of like trying to do a little bit less or take a break is like, oh, let's do less. Oh, wait, no, I want to do this too. My process for games has sort of solidified into, I'll usually have an idea, either for theme or mechanic. Sometimes, influenced by playing another game that I like, and I'm like, oh, that dice thing was really cool that they did in there. Is there something similar I could do with some other stuff, or watching a movie or reading a book or, some kind of thing that inspires theme. And then if it catches my eye enough, I'll write in my notebook. I'll get a notebook. I really like writing by hand and just sort of sitting in like a comfortable chair or on my couch and just start brainstorming like, okay, how would this game work? What are the resources? What is a player's turn like? What's the structure? And try and like get ideas out there as far as like what the possibilities are. And then if it's still exciting, keep going on it till I nail down a list of like, okay, these are the things I need to design to make this game happen. So, I'm going to need like 20 cards that do these kind of things, and this is their basic structure. I'll need a board that's got 5 regions. I'll need this kind of thing. And so I'll make myself a list. I'm a big list person. So I'll be like, here's a list of like action items that I need to do to make a prototype to play. And then I'll try and break it down into those smaller parts. And it used to be that I would just, anytime I got an idea, I would start writing on it and then start working on it and be like, cool, let me start making a prototype of this. And I gradually ended up with, like many designers, I think like 15 or 20 prototypes, and some of them weren't that good. Some of them I wasn't that passionate about, and just realized in the last, 2 years that I didn't have time to do them all. And so now I have a big Google spreadsheet where I just write in game ideas that I have. So if I have a game idea that's interesting, I'll write it down there and just sort of leave it for later and be like, I'm going to come back and look at this list and see, maybe if I'm doing a game and I need another mechanic, I'll come through here and see if any of these apply. Or, if I have enough free time, I'll, hopefully someday go back through and look at them and be like, oh, this game was really cool. I want to do this now. This is the right time. If a game catches my fancy enough and I can't stop thinking about it, then I'll just keep working on it, and I'll be like, okay, I really need to get these ideas down and give this game some solidity and like get it to sort of the first prototype step, or get at least a simple rules document written for now. And then depending on how much time I have, I'll either leave that to later or try and get a playtest in.
Is there a kind of like a genre game that you've you're still wanting to kind of like develop as you go? I mean, as part of your ideas, is there ones that you're still like wanting to crack that you haven't kind of quite got there? That you find out, I'm going to start off with this, and oh no, it's gone like this, and I'd really want to stay like this. But is there a particular kind of style of game that you're still really, really interested in kind of developing and kind of getting out there?
Yeah, I think the one that's really been attractive to me, and I've been thinking about a lot recently, is an engine builder. Because, and I'm thinking sort of like Terraforming Mars or Wingspan or Gizmos, things like that, where you're getting cards and they're combining together and keep building and building, and your engine sort of accelerates and accelerates. And the games I've worked on, they have some elements. Some of them have elements of engine building, but none of them are really purely focused on that. And and I think I enjoy games of that type, and I just haven't been able to really come up with a good structure or figure out how those work. And I think that's one type of game that I'd really like to develop and make at some point.
They're really tricky. They're really, really tricky, because I think it's one of the few genres of game where you can actually break the game and break the game quite considerably if you get it kind of like the wrong way. I think I played a game last year, and I'm not going to name it for two reasons, because I'm too old and I can't remember the name of it. But also, I don't want to be throwing shade on somebody who's obviously spent time developing an engine building game. But there was a point where we actually needed to stop the game and take away that card, actually remove it from the game.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Because having it in the game with a combination of three other cards, it was the infinite genie problem. All of a sudden I had everything I could possibly want, wishes, for forever kind of thing. And that became like a kind of a real issue. So I've always got hats off for engine. One of the funnest examples I've remember of an engine building game was, and it's pretty kind of relevant to now, was Steampunk Rally, the original first version. And I just loved kind of, here's some fire, and there's all of the boost and all of the steam and all of the electricity, and it was just, you were able to kind of get it going, but you were never in a kind of a perpetual motion machine. I only mentioned, I think Steampunk Rally Fusion is still on the go, or is potentially just recently kind of finished its kind of latest kind of Kickstarter thing.
I'm excited to check that one out. I never checked out the first one, but I'm definitely excited for the new Steampunk Fusion. And the engine builders, I think that's what's interesting, is because as a designer, you're kind of playing with fire, where you're like, oh, this is cool. I want to have these things that players can build up and feel really powerful, get these cool things, but I can't let it get out of hand. Like, there needs to be some breaks at some points, but you want to have all this potential that players have without having it being like totally overwhelming.
Yeah, it's the runaway winner syndrome that you get, because if you get somebody that has an amazing engine, you want everybody else to be easily able to kind of catch up on that engine, because otherwise, what seems like a really good idea when it comes to second games, and it says, oh, do you want to play this again? And it's like, no, because last time I played it, you were able to rattle off kind of 1,300 points while I was getting 5. So no, let's play kind of something else, kind of entirely.
Totally.
What you develop games like March of the Ants, and then you do something like the Grimm Forest, and then you do like things like Tidal Blades, and then you've got the most recent one that you did, which was the Wonderland War one. Do you kind of, are you ticking off kind of genres as you go? I mean, is it because some designers that I know, they have you can look at a particular game and say that's very, very Jamie Stegmaier kind of thing, or that's very, very David Turczi. Are you kind of, is this because of your personality for generally kind of wanting to, you do something very, very well, and then you kind of like move on? So did you say, well, I'm going to do resource gathering, kind of like Grimm Forrest, and then I'm going to go, I'm going to go in something different and do, say, like Tidal Blades, which is completely different, and then Wonderland War. I mean, is that kind of your MO as well?
I don't, not intentionally, not as a conscious decision. So I haven't, I haven't really actually thought about it, having them all laid out like that, but being like, oh yeah, so there's some social deduction with Grim Masquerade, there's area control, there's 4X, there, so I have kind of jumped around a lot, which I think it's more, for me, more of the exploration of game design and being like, okay, what's this mechanic like, or what does it feel like to incorporate a lot of dice in a game, and figuring that out as it goes. There are definitely designers who sort of stick with one style of game and do that style really well. And I haven't consciously steered away from that, but I have, I think, through a mix of sort of luck and probably unconscious, desire, created a bunch of different genres of games. So, and I think, as I said, engine building's very appealing to me, and I've also thought about some really narrative-based games that I'm interested in making. And so I am, I think, more intrigued by doing something new than returning to another type of game that I've already made.
Yeah, the other thing is, as well, do you have to be conscious of also what's out there at the same time as well? I know that the board game space is kind of funny, that you get kind of at any one time, there's literally hundreds of games being released. And when you come to Essen, and it's different obviously this year, but there's still going to be a couple of thousand games kind of released. Do you keep an eye on kind of what else is out there? Do you see kind of trends kind of cropping up and things like that, or do you just kind of work on an idea in order to kind of make sure it's not affected by kind of outside influences, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I have some awareness of the industry, and that sort of percolates in my mind a little bit. Legacy games have been really hot for 3 or 4 years, and roll and write games. So those are things I'm like, oh, maybe I want to dip my toes in those, or maybe it's too late and they've already passed a little bit. But I generally don't pay as much attention as I think I could to that, and don't, intentionally set out to be like, ooh, I think a game like this will be really good right now. This is what the market wants. I'm going to bring this game to market to, and it's going to be really effective. I'm more sort of just nose in my notebook, making a game that I'm excited about, and I think if anything, it's more the games that have come out in the last year or two that I've been exposed to that then sort of propel me to be inspired to pursue different ideas or mechanics. Because a lot of my inspiration draws from games I've played, and combining some mechanics from those with other games and sort of building, on top of those ideas.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think especially with the number of games that come out, and especially as we don't know, it's very difficult to say that's going to be a definite hit, or that's going to be a miss, or people are going to love that, or people are going to hate it. And I think you can end up spending up too much time trying to see what the latest next game that certain designers and developers that are doing, that you end up just accidental osmosis kind of saying, oh, I've heard they've got this mechanic and I better kind of add it in. I think the most interesting example of that is the fact that and the wingspan that continues to, everybody's I don't know, everybody's kind of like, oh, wingspan again, why are you mentioning that? Can we ring the wingspan bell, please? But the interesting thing about wingspan is that, unlike say the movie industry, there's not been what seems to be kind of 50 kind of copies of what kind of wingspan kind of does, which I found kind of fascinating.
Right. It is interesting that there's not as many. We see some themes crop up, like Vikings were really popular like 3 or 4 years ago, and then detectives with Chronicles of Crime, a detective game, and I think there was one or two others that were sort of on that same theme. But you're right, we don't see like, oh, everybody was going to do an engine builder that's nature based, and like let's just spam this space. So it is interesting, and I think that's nice because in the movie industry it gets a little crowded there. The other thing about trying to time a game to be like right for what the market wants is it's really hard to make a game come out in a fixed amount of time. Like even when I've been like, ooh, cool, this idea is good, it's clean, it's close to finished, still I'm usually off by like 6 months or a year for how long it's going to take me to design, develop, and sort of finalize the game and then bring it to market. And so it's hard to predict like when actually it's going to. So if I have an idea today, I might be able to get it out in a year if I'm really like drop everything and focus on it. But usually it'll be like a year and a half to 3 years before it actually comes to fruition. So projecting that far out feels really difficult to me.
Yeah, and you don't know what's kind of going to be, because there are guys that are taking, they're not all necessarily designing from scratch. What they're doing is they're actively signing people who have created games as well. So I see a lot of Kickstarter publishers. I mean, even Skybound themselves have signed up kind of people who, here's a prototype of a game. What do you think? And it's like, yeah, brilliant. Let's just get that.
Let's do it.
Let's just get that. Yep. Let's do it. Let's just make it. Let's just kind of get that kind of sorted out. So it's very, very kind of difficult to kind of tell the future. One of the things that the games are noted for is the high kind of production values. The Grimm Forrest was in some ways, there was minis, there was beautiful, there was plastic resources. Some people didn't like the amount of stuff that was involved, because a lot of it they felt it was a little bit kind of over and above kind of the extras, and personally I always thought it was a little bit of a victim of the stretch goal thing, where there was a little extras that were kind of added on it. Was the version of Grimm Forest that you originally had, was it a lot was it a lot smaller? Was it a case of like, here you go, it's two decks of cards, James,
well,
2 decks of cards with a tableau.
Yep.
When you got the finished copy, were you just like that? I kind of asked for a sandwich. I feel like I got Christmas dinner.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still blown away by how gorgeous that game is and how much it, how produced it is. And I think people say it's overproduced, or they say they feel like there's a lot in there, and there's a lot that's in there is not needed for the game. I think part of its success is that it does bring the world to life so much. But yes, when I first conceptualized it, actually it was the first game that I started working on when I got into board game design. Even before March of the Ants, I had the idea for Grimm Forest. And I originally thought I was going to make games myself by hand. That was my first plan, was to make them and sell them at the Saturday market here in Portland, because that's what I had sort of known and had done before. So I was like, cool, I'm going to make a game. And so I was like, well, let's make it card based, because I think I can at least print that locally or keep that, do that by myself. And so it was all card based from at the first iteration. It was, you had your gather cards and all the, wolves and fables. And even the houses you built were just like 3 card sections of different houses that you'd like build up together. So, and then it was originally called Little Pig, and I attempted to run a Kickstarter for it myself back in the day in like 2015 after I did the March of the Ants. And I was like, great, this is going to be good. Call it Little Pig. And I was like, well, I should make little houses for it if I'm going to bring it on Kickstarter, because people want some kind of, some blingy items or something that really catches people's eyes. So I've had some little like wood houses that look really silly in comparison to the houses, how they ended up, but they were just sort of like a flat base and then like a little wood square middle and then a little triangular top. And the Kickstarter flopped. I just did not project very well and didn't market it very well. And the name Little Pig made people think that it was just a game for little kids, that it wasn't more of a family game or could be played with strategy, like with adult gamers and enjoyed. And so when I passed it off to James, I changed the name to Grimm Forrest because I wanted it to be a little more edgier, have a little more, interesting sounding than Little Pig. And it had cards and it had the little like wood houses. And then from there he went and and I actually did have I had these little pigs that I'd first gotten, like the little Pass the pigs that stand up, but then I'd also found these little pigs at a toy store and like painted them up in the different player colors. So there were some little like pig minis that I think were included in the copy I handed to him. They might have just been little cutouts of pigs, though. I forget exactly what was at that stage. But then he went and he came back to me, and I was like, "Whoa, okay, houses. Oh, okay, dragon. Okay, this and that, and like really took it and ran with it." And I think that's one of the things that James does really well is he has these big visions and like brings them to life and puts like a lot of energy and thought into the presentation and production, which I think is cool. It's not necessarily my strong suit. I'm more of like, well, we'll just do the minimum or do what we can here. But, there's value in making it, look amazing and like be, really eye catching.
But then, I mean, on the opposite end of the spectrum, you then get like, say, Tidal Blades, which seems to me is like, everything is functional within that. It'd be, it's very, very difficult to remove any part of that game that wouldn't have an effect on kind of how the game would play. And to me, that seems to be kind of like, as I say, the polar opposite. And it's still one of these games that I look at and I'm going, oh, that's just so nice.
Definitely. And I think we hit our stride there a little bit more because it was the same team that did Grimm Forrest. It was, Druid City Games, Skybound, and James, and then Mr. Cuddington, the artists, and myself, and my brother was my co-designer on that. But I think from Grimm Forrest, James was like, well, production's really cool, but, hearing people's feedback that like, well, we want these things to be important and have a purpose for reason why they look so nice or why we need these big minis. He learned from that. And so we incorporated it more into the design and, made it all very, things made the choices to make things more essential and more part of the overall game. So, and that was with Grimm Forrest. I passed the game off to James at Gen Con, and he and his team did a lot of development and work on it and sort of independently from me for a while. And then when they brought it back, I was like, this is great. This all works well. But they'd made some choices like, of some things that I might not have, if I'd been involved more, I might have been like, oh, if we're going to have minis for the monsters, let's make them more, impactful for the game and make them, earn their place as a component. I might not have, that's hard to say. And, we're talking about an expansion for the game and a way to make all those pieces a little bit more impactful and meaningful in the expansions. So, but it's a learning process and we're all sort of getting better at it as we go, hopefully.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, as I say, it's all a kind of a learning experience. And that's what, as I say, Tidal Blades was the kind of the lean, mean kind of killing machine.
Definitely.
Let's talk about, let's dial it back a bit.
All right.
Tim, let's get a little bit, let's been intense.
Just relax a little bit.
Just a little bit, we've had the, we just want to be having a little stroll through a nice little forest.
Since we're oh yeah, tell me about this forest.
And there's, sun kind of breaking the leaves slightly a little bit. You're breathing in what's pure air. You're far enough away from the city and taking big lungfuls of air now. And as you look up, you see above you what can only be described as a rather lovely looking canopy.
Oh, man.
Do you know anything about canopies at all, Tim, that you could maybe talk to us about?
I do know quite a bit about canopies. So the canopy is one of the tallest, highest stories in the forest. A lot of forests have a few layers of like the understory where it's dark and not much sunlight gets through, and then there's the lower story, and you get up to the canopy. And the canopy is actually in a lot of forests where a lot of the life lives. There's not much sunlight in the dense like canopies of rainforest. There's not much sunlight that actually gets down to the lower part of the rainforest or water. And so a lot of plants and animals and things live in the canopy of a rainforest. So it's a very diverse, vibrant ecosystem that has evolved there.
If you were going to consider making some kind of maybe interactive cardboard type of experience in relation to a canopy, what would you do for that, Tim?
I think if I was to do that, I would really want to try and build in this feeling of you're trying to get things that the right balance of plants and animals and trees that sort of can co-inhabit the canopy in a symbiotic way, and to really find the right balance for your ecosystem there. And so I think like some card drafting where you have players selecting from different card pools of what kind of, if they're going to add more trees to their forest or more plants, or maybe they want to attract some toucans or a sloth to help their forest grow. I think that would be, the direction I would go in. I would also be a little, I think there's in the rainforest, one of the cool things is there's a lot of, it seems like a peaceful, really fun place, but there is some like competition and there's some threats. There's a lot of things trying to get that sunlight and trying to get that water. So I think there would be, a little bit of danger in the game too. There might be some fire that could happen if you're not careful with your forest. There might be some disease that, your animals, if you get too many animals in your forest, they might be susceptible to some disease. But mostly it would be about, finding the ideal balance of sunlight and rain and just creating this really thriving, beautiful, bountiful forest.
That sounds like you've almost planned this out a little bit.
Well, to be honest, I've thought about it a little bit. I do have a game called Canopy, which is coming to Kickstarter. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I know you were just somehow just daydreaming about the rainforest.
I just was thinking about, I know. I'm thinking about Planet Earth. You're thinking about commercialism.
Oh man, how can we sell the rainforest? That's the thing I'm thinking about. So I have a game coming to Kickstarter in a couple weeks, and it's a 2-player game. And you're drafting cards, so you're picking from 3 different piles. And you'll be adding those cards to your tableau. So you're building up different plants and animals, and you're growing your trees that can keep getting taller and taller. And I think I'm really excited for it. It's going to be a really fun, streamlined 2-player drafting game, which I think drafting at 2 players is kind of a difficult thing in a lot of games. Like a lot of drafting games that go to 2 players don't work that well. 7 Wonders Duel being a notable exception. But I think I'm excited about it. It's one of the lighter games I've designed. I've been doing like Wonderland's War and Tidal Blades, and a couple of these games are of pretty epic scope. So they've got a lot of stuff going on. They deliver this very big experience. And so I was excited to make something a little bit smaller and more compact and really try and constrain myself a little bit to be more focused on, let's keep it approachable and keep it a sort of entry level game. And so I'm excited about that, because part of the thing that's a little bit of a bummer about game design is I have a lot of friends who don't play really complex games. So they're like, "Oh, what are you working on? I'd love to play it." And I'm like, "Well, thank you, but I don't actually think you'd enjoy trying to learn these rules and sit down for a 2-hour gaming experience, like some of them, yes, but some of them I'm like, well, I'll tell you about it, but I don't, it's not really something I can share with everybody."
Yeah, I think in those situations it's really difficult. The explaining can put people off. Actually getting them to sit down and actually play around. You get them playing around and they'll go, "All right, I get it." But it's taking you 45 minutes to explain exactly how we're going to be doing it in the first place. It's like, yes, I know. That's why I'm just trying to get you to the table.
Totally.
Just to play the damn game. You're going to be are you self-publishing this one through Kickstarter then yourself?
Yep, I'll be doing a Kickstarter as Weird City Games, and I'm excited about that because there's fun things. I really like working with publishers, and Skybound and Druid City in particular has been a really great relationship. But it's fun sort of running everything myself as well. There's some independence there, and some just ability to sort of have control of the whole project. I'm looking forward to that, and I really like sort of connecting with the backers on Kickstarter and involving them in some of the decision making and some of the some direction of what wildlife are we going to add to the game, or what kind of new things are we going to do, and just listening to their feedback has been really helpful during the last games that I've designed.
Have you with it being like a more simplistic card game, is that affected the kind of the price that you're going to be for the pledge levels and things like that? Have you nailed that final price down? Because I know that these things can change literally to like the last couple of days before the campaign goes live. So have you thought about kind of like pledge levels for the campaign and things like that?
I have, definitely, and I've got them in a good ballpark, and I am trying to keep it pretty affordable. One, it's a 2-player game, and 2, it's a lighter experience. So I'm going to have, I think, like a lot of Kickstarters do these days, is a basic sort of retail pledge level, and then the deluxe pledge level, which will have some like little wooden animals and other sort of fancy pieces that you can get for a little bit more. So there'll be a premium one that's like, okay, if you really want to get the full, deluxe experience, you can do that. But the general pledge, I'm probably going to try and keep close to around $20, to keep that affordable. And I think one that's, I like, especially in these sort of times that are a little tougher financially, I want to have something that's a little more approachable to people. And it's nice as a Kickstarter creator to try and attract just more backers, so that it's a little easier for people to sign up. And you can see like some campaigns like Tiny Epic has done really well because they're like, oh, we've gotten, 10,000 people. So then they have 10,000 people that know their games and enjoy them and will, look at their next games a little bit more. And so I've got a couple bigger games that I've been working on for a while that I hope to bring to Kickstarter. And so I think having, if I can attract a couple thousand new people to Weird City Games and, get the chance to deliver a good product to them, then I'll have sort of built up that relationship too. So, and then also thinking on the retail side, I hope to bring the game to retail, after the Kickstarter finishes. And so making something that can go on a good number of shelves or be easily, displayed and like be a good seller at retail is also sort of on my mind.
So if you describe Canopy on a sell sheet fashion in about 57 words.
57.
57. I'm going to count them then. Why should people consider jumping in and backing Canopy?
Yeah, well, Canopy is a game specifically designed for 2 players that will immerse you in the rainforest. It's a great blend of luck and skill, and it's got this push your luck drafting mechanism that is very engaging and very fun, where you're each turn you have to sort of weigh the benefits of each set of cards for yourself. And it's gorgeously illustrated by Vincent Dutray. So there's also a very lovely package for it. I think I'm over my 57 words, or I'm rambling.
It's about 106 just now.
Okay.
106.
All right. Well, I could cut some of that out. Some of that was just fluff.
Well, I'm going to have to cut some of it so we can go.
I go over the
so then we can jump to that. Goes, that was so well done, Tim. You came right in at 57 words. I'm so it's just the mark of an absolute pure professional that we're dealing with somebody who can just rise up to the challenge. But no, I agree with you. I don't know, I must be getting old and Scottish and stingy as I get older, because I do troll past some of the Kickstarter things and I'm going, how much?
Right.
How much you wanting? Do you know what I mean? could you take kidneys?
Totally.
Because I've got 2 of them, you could have one of them. And that's fine, because there's some business models and these companies are doing absolutely fantastically well, and that's brilliant. But So I'm just like, I get asthma sometimes
Yeah.
when I look at pledge levels. What are you doing? Kind of goodness me. But
And for me, I mean, like, I want to make games like I want to be able to support myself. You know, this is my full-time job, but I also want to, like, my main goal is to have a lot of people play my games. You know, I want to, like, that's going to make me feel fulfilled and the happiest as a designer if my games reach a lot of people and they can enjoy them. And so trying to keep those barriers to entry low, you know, whether they're the theme or the approachability of the mechanics or the cost is, you know, are all things that I kind of take into account now.
Yeah, and also, not being funny, but if this does become the norm, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be looking at ways involving their families kind of playing games.
Definitely.
And I'm not just talking about, you know, and I'm not just talking about kind of like, oh, everybody kind of get around and we'll have a nice simple game or something. It's like, this could be a very, very good thing for the tabletop industry, depending on how we approach it, kind of thing. And I think, you know, games like Canopy, Grimm Forrest and things like that are good kind of points to say to people, yes, I know we're all sick of playing Monopoly, but look at this, what I've got here. And then once you get them through that, then it's only a matter of time before you're getting them on the more complicated stuff as well. You know, that's the way I look at it.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I think there's a potential for, you know, we'll see how everything shakes out, but I think board games have a good potential to be, you know, stay as an integral part and sort of even grow in this time, and as a small group activity that people can do in their houses and provide like a lot of enjoyment and, you know, learning possibilities for kids and for adults and just like a fun way to interact. So and that for me is something I'm excited to work on. So I've been trying to do some more simpler games or smaller games for that, and also because they're a lot easier to design. They just take less time and you get less of the headache of revision and the slog and the tableau of the game design process.
Exactly, and it gives an opportunity for my son to turn around to me like he did this evening and say, "Dad, you're just rubbish," which is what he did.
Why did he say that?
Because I lost the game. I lost the game very, very quickly. I was playing a kind of a rather simplistic but very fun game, and I lost very, very, very quickly. And he laughed, and he's just, "Dad, you're just rubbish."
You're just rubbish.
You're just rubbish. So there you go. If people want to keep an eye on you on the internet webs, where do you exist on the internet webs, Mr. Eisner?
I am on the social media on Facebook at Tim Eisner, and then also Weird City Games has a Facebook page, and Weird City Games also has a website that's just www.weirdcitygames.com, and those are mostly where I'm residing unless I'm on Kickstarter, depending on the time of year. So yeah, would love to connect with anybody who wants to talk games or play games or anything.
Superb. Well, what we'll do is we'll make sure that we put all the links in the show notes so that we've got notes to show.
Perfect. Can I ask you one question before we...
yes, you can. Yes, you can.
So I'm curious about this title here, though. We're not wizards. And the intro, it sounds like you're really not wizards, because it could be sort of snarky that you are wizards, but you're saying you're not. So, yeah, I'm just curious about that one.
Okay. The theme tune, right, is meant to be 1980s sitcom. And when Vine was a thing, which was a couple of years ago now.
Oh yeah.
I did essentially a very, very cheesy 1980s intro of the camera, of me having my back to the camera and turning around and smiling at the camera in various different places. And I'm continually thinking that one day I will actually film the We're Not Wizards theme tune as it was intended, in a kind of a, almost like a Golden Girls type kind of intro, but we'll need to see. In terms of the name, the name of the show is all because I started going to the board game club probably about 5-6 years ago now, maybe longer. And then when I was at work and I was like, came in with like various colourful boxes, they were asking, well, what are you doing? Where are you going? I says, well, I'm going to the board game club after work.
Mm-hmm.
To which they says, oh, right, okay, you're going to be casting spells, and started calling me Harry Potter and, saying Expelliarmus, and, obviously you're going to be fighting a dragon, and then you're going to be Gandalf. And I turned around and says, no, I just, we do all different types of things, but I just, we're not wizards. And that's where it came from.
Nice.
That's
I like
it's not because I looked around and saw that the fact that everybody else used the word board in their title. It's just the fact it was something different.
I like
and
it.
I was quite angry at the time. I was like, look. And I grabbed him by his fat head and I went, we're not wizards. There
We're
we
not
go.
wizards. This is a game
And it
about
was
trains.
It was worth, exactly. It was worth the disciplinary. That's all I'm saying.
Totally.
Awesome. Disciplinary. If you want to keep an eye on what we're up to, then there's a couple of places you can go to if you want to listen to more of the blogs. If you want to listen to more of the podcast, listen to the blog. You can listen to the blog if you want. I don't care. If you want to listen more of the podcast, go to we'renotwizards.com. If you want to read our words, go to we'renotwizards.co.uk. If you want to see us on Instagram and Twitter and other places, just it's / We're Not Wizards is usually going to find us. If you like to watch our videos, because we're doing reviews of videos and other videos, I don't know. Whatever takes my fancy, it's like I can do whatever I want. It's my show. Then you can go to youtube.com / We're Not Wizards Tabletop Podcast. If you like what you've listened to tonight, just tell somebody else, because we spread like butter. But make sure you check out Canopy when it comes to Kickstarter on the 9th of June, not June 9th. That's not how you do dates. Goodness sake.
Apologies.
That's fine. No, you should. And so you should.
Are you wizard?
But thank you very much. Look. No, don't even. Let's not go there. Right. Okay. There's only a couple more things to do. Thank you very, very much for coming on, Tim. This has been a lot of fun.
Oh, it was my pleasure. I really enjoyed being here. This was one of the most fun podcasts I've been on.
Awesome. And there is only a couple more things to do. The first thing is to remember we're many things, but we're not wizards. Are we wizards, Tim?
No.
Oh, okay. I am.
Oh.
And the second thing is to say goodbye. So it's a goodbye from the rather wonderful, rather fantastic Mr. Tim Eisner. Say goodbye, Tim.
Goodbye.
And it's a goodbye for me. Remember, is it secret? Is it safe? Stay safe. Roll sixes. Make something awful. And goodbye.
A wizard is never late. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.